The AMG GT3 from Cada is finally complete. Did I do it in the 14 hours claimed by my fellow YouTubers? No. This is probably a 20 to 22 hour build, depending on your skill level and how long you want to take getting everything right. Something that I thought I'd done really well, but you'll find out later in the video that that didn't quite go according to plan. If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you'll know that it's not an Andy Lego loving dad video if at least one or two mistakes aren't made. Is this thing perfect? No. Is it pretty damn close? Yes. Does it completely rewrite the rulebook on 1/8 scale cars and what we now expect from this type of build? Absolutely. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the build experience, the overall fit and finish, what I think about the Technic features and what I think about what they've left out, what I love about this set and what didn't quite go to plan and what I feel like Cada could just slightly tweak for their future builds. So, the build experience. On all the previous Cada sets, right up until the point they released the Lotus Exige, there's been multiple points throughout the build process where you've been asked to put a piece in, and if you're an experienced Technic builder, you've looked at it and gone, I should have put that in 5 stages ago. My fingers might now be facing in the way nature intended if I had. On this, it seems like they've listened to the feedback, because despite the fact that this is 5,500 pieces in the footprint of a traditional 1/8 scale car, none of that is at play. Every single piece went in the order that it should have done. So somehow, between the Yangwang U9 and the release of this, which is only a few months, they've actually managed to really get that right. And it's very Lego-esque in the way that the build stages follow on from each other. At no point did I have to try and get a piece somewhere where I just simply couldn't get it, or I had to use pliers or tweezers or a hammer. From the moment you open the instruction book, as I've said with a lot of the previous Cada sets, they really are matching the market leader for accessibility. One stage, one piece per page, really broken down stages make it very, very easy to follow the instructions. There is a point though that even with accessible instructions, if you're not paying attention with a set with this many pieces, you can still make a mistake. And I'll talk about that later in the video in terms of how I think Cada could just eliminate some of those errors. The instructions have been one of the most impressive parts for me about Cada over the last 6 or 7 months or so, and they really are matching Lego for their accessibility. And when you consider this set has got 16 or 1700 more pieces than the P1, to make it that accessible, to make it that broken down, is quite an achievement. The only thing I think they could do, and I've said this in my previous videos and I'll probably continue to say it until someone decides to change it, is break the stages down into individual bags. This set has 9 stages, which if you consider a 5,500 piece set, that's a lot of pieces per stage. I'm not going to try and work out how many because we haven't got time for that. But when you build the equivalent Lego model, that would have maybe 30 or 35 stages with just the right pieces for that individual stage. And I think if you're like me, someone that builds in stages in half an hour or an hour stints because of time restrictions, family, kids, dog, life, that gives you a sense of achievement that you can get a whole stage done within your time window. With this, it could take me 3 or 4 days to finish one stage. And not to mention the fact that I need a lot of pieces out on the table at any one point. And when you've got limited build space, again, like I have, my wife's not too keen on the dining room table constantly being covered in bricks. I can understand why. So that's something that I would definitely look to improve as Cada progress. But other than that, the build experience is exactly what you would like to expect and more for the price point that these are at. Fit and finish has gone up a level since the Lotus Exige, and on this, again, I'm going to come back to it because of the piece count. You might expect there to be a few fumbles, a few bits that don't quite fit as you would expect them to be. Is it perfection? No, you're not going to expect a brick set to ever be perfection. I've never built a brick set that is perfect all the way round. But is it pretty damn close? Absolutely. There's a couple of areas where I've had to slightly modify the openings for the bonnet, for example, which I'll come on to in a bit. But in general, the fit and finish of this thing is absolutely exquisite. There are no tight pieces that don't quite go in, no loose pieces that fall out like perhaps you would expect from alternative brands. And I think we need to stop thinking of Cada as an alternative brand to Lego. When it comes to cars like this, sets like this, they are the benchmark setter now. There's no doubt about it. Lego really need to take note as to what these guys are doing, especially with this set, because this set really is hitting a new benchmark. I was particularly impressed with the interior. The seat is unlike anything I've ever seen in one of these type of sets and completely reminiscent of the production car. The dashboard is built in one module because this is a modular set, and unlike normal Technic sets where the dash goes in before any of the bodywork, the dash was actually part of stage 9 on this set, but it's still clipped in with 2 pins with complete ease. The way they've actually constructed this and the stages and the order that they go in is quite remarkable. It's not really like anything I've seen before. Even the engine block went in last. When have you ever known the engine to be built last? But I quite liked it. I like the fact that the front of the engine actually just lifts out, hence the engine crane that they give you as an accessory. Bit of a gimmick, but it's quite nice. I quite like it. It's supposed to be a race car after all. Talking of the engine bay, this is the only area where I had to make a slight modification. I've seen on previous YouTube videos of this set that people have left it as the instructions intended. And what happens with that is it leaves the bonnet hugely proud of the rest of the body, of the wing, for example. And I just can't have that. That would literally keep me up at night. So I've actually taken the strut out of its holder, out of its pin, and just left it loose for display purposes. And then when I lift the bonnet, I just rest the strut in a convenient position to hold the bonnet up. If you keep it as the instructions intended, it's just too tight a fit for it to go down fully into position. And then you lose this classic sweeping long bonnet line of the AMG GT3. And then for me, that kind of ruins the whole build. Other than that, I've not made any modifications whatsoever. It's been the perfect build, really. What particularly impresses me about this set though is the way they've created the shapes. With previous models and other brands away from Cada that have tried to create cars that perhaps Lego haven't, their attempts to create the shapes to make it look like the production car have been poor. You could literally blow on it and it would fall apart. With this, some of the pieces they've used to create the angles needed to make this literally look like an exact replica of the production car are unlike anything I've ever seen. They've been so creative with the way the panels connect that it's worked. It's given them the angles they need, it's given them the shapes, and I've honestly never seen anything like it. It's beyond tradition. It's beyond anything that has been done before. This isn't a copy. This isn't let's look at what the best people do and do that. This is completely unique in the way that it goes together. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, it sets a new benchmark for the way these sets are built and created. So the movable features on this car are limited, which is exactly how I like it. I'm so glad they didn't go down the motors route. In fact, even with limited movable and controllable parts, I still think they've gone too far. The gas lift, which lifts the car off the ground, we'll come on to that in a minute because I had a few problems with that, if I'm being honest. The lights, they look nice when they're on, but it has to be plugged in for them to work, so it kind of defeats the object a little bit. I don't really get the purpose of that. Obviously you've got bonnet lift, rear boot lid, the doors, which are very nice. You've got steering, which again I would say is a little bit loose. There's quite a bit of play in the steering mechanism. I do love the fact that you've got a tool to move the steering column forwards and backwards. That's, again, unlike anything we've ever seen on any of these sets. That attention to detail is really evident there. But it is quite loose, the steering mechanism. And actually on mine, I found that it goes all the way one way if you move the wheels, and then when it comes back the other way, the steering wheel is pretty much straight. If you turn the steering wheel with your fingers, it will go where it needs to go. But there's a hell of a lot of play in the system. And I swear I built it I took a particularly long time trying to line these pins up, and it's still not been brilliant. Honestly though, do I care? God no. Of course, as with any of these big builds, you have gear changing facilities. And again, that's something I'll come on to in a second, because you've got to have your wits about you with that. It is probably the most technical gearbox I've ever built on this type of set, hence the piece count. It's a work of art when you're actually building it, but you need to be making sure that you've got everything where it needs to be. A millimetre out on a rod and you could have problems. More about that in a second. Working suspension is obviously now pretty standard on these type of cars, but now that they've started to make the suspension adjustable, that kind of throws in another issue, because while my rear suspension works perfectly, my front suspension not so much. Again, I'll come on to that in a second, because is it a Cada problem or is it a me problem? I think we probably all know the answer to that by now. To say what I love about this car would take me all day. It's a lot easier to say what I don't. But I'm going to pick out some of the key highlights, because I think it's really important for you guys to know just how exquisitely put together this set is. From the detail on the interior that is totally reminiscent of the production car, the netting that goes between the driver and the passenger, for example. The way the interior is put together. I actually have a modern Mercedes, and I know for a fact that the dash is very reminiscent of a modern Mercedes car. The big screen in the middle. I love the engine and the way that that's put in late. I love the detailing around it. I love the fact you can take it out. I love the way that this thing looks like the production car. The tyres, the branded tyres, partnerships they've got with Michelin, the wheels, the locking wheel nuts, the custom calipers. I could go on and on and on. Overall, the way this car stands on your display, the stance of this thing. I mean, the two bumpers took me 3 hours each. They are so detailed, so big. This thing just feels bigger. It's no longer than a P1, no higher or wider than a P1, but it just feels so muscular. It's got presence, it's got real form. I think if you build this set, you'll feel exactly like I do about it. You'll get to the end and think, wow, that is the best set in my collection by quite some margin. I love the fact that they've been able to get that many pieces into a car this size, which tells you a lot about the way production cars are going now. They've been so loyal to the actual AMG GT3, which is a very technical, highly advanced car. The Lotus XZs that I built before this wasn't, and they were true to that. It was simple in its form, it was beautiful in its simplicity. This car came along 25 years after that car, so it's going to be more technical, it's going to have more to it. And is that a statement to all of the future 1/8 scale cars? If they're building and they're being true to the originals, are we going to start seeing more of these builds with that many pieces? Who knows? It would make sense, wouldn't it? I even love the side exhausts, the way that you can see them all the way along the door line. It just looks so original. And as I've said before, the shapes they create, on the front wings especially, they've had to not only make them go in, but make them just slightly angle. And when you get this thing, you'll see how they've done it. The strength of the connections is so impressive. It's unlike any other build I've ever experienced. Okay, so before I tell you what didn't quite go to plan and what I think Cada could improve on, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you like watching these builds, these alternative brand builds, Cada and others, and I'll throw some Lego in there at some point as well, but you tend to find my Lego stuff is more on my TikTok and my Shorts channels, then please subscribe. Help an old man who likes playing around with bricks continue to stay motivated to make these videos. And actually, at the point of making this video, we are on 996 subscribers. So the hope is that this video is good enough to get over 1,000 You would imagine it would be, but maybe I'm blowing my own trumpet. Okay, so what didn't go well? If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you'll know that it wouldn't be right for me to go through a build without making any mistakes. In fact, the only one I haven't done that on was the Lotus Exige, and that was because it was simple. Oh no, the RX-7. The RX-7 didn't have any mistakes. But the Yang Wang, that definitely did. The AMG 1, that definitely did. It's supposed to be 4-wheel drive. It was only 2. And now this. So, nothing life or death, but it does raise a very good point about how Cada could improve the build experience. And actually, it's not just Cada, it's all brands. The gearbox. As I was building it, I was in a rush, if I'm being honest, and it is a true work of genius. But I didn't realise until much later on when I watched a fellow YouTuber reviewing this set that the big things that stick out the back of the gearbox were actually paddles that change the gears. Well, mine don't work quite as Cada intended. They need a little bit of persuasion to work through the gears. Now this could be a rod that is 0.5 millimetre too long or too short, and that's a shame, but I don't really care because once it goes on my display I'm probably never going to touch it again. But I think it's something for you to be aware of when you are building that gearbox. Before you go any further than you have to, check it, test it, make sure it works as it's supposed to work. The other thing is the gas lift. Now, I am convinced that I have all the gas lines where they needed to be. I was meticulous in pushing those tiny little tubes onto the nozzles as far down as they could possibly go. I didn't want any mistakes, and it doesn't work. I have sat there pumping and pumping and pumping. So somewhere in that system there is a leak and a break, which is again a shame, but I know that it works. I've watched a previous video from a fellow YouTuber who has considerably more subscribers than me, who built this in 14 hours apparently, and his work. So please don't listen to me because I am a fool, and just be aware that that needs testing as soon as possible. Don't wait till the end like me and realise, oh, it doesn't work, because I'm certainly not going to pull it apart and try and fix it. And then the last thing is the front suspension. Since they've started doing the adjustable springs, it has thrown an element of complexity. And in fact, that particular YouTuber who I mentioned to you, he does a whole stint on getting used to the dampers, making sure you understand them, making sure you play around with them, making sure that you adjust and feel the tension, feel the recoil, so you know how high to have this car. Now, as you look at this car now, I feel like it sits at the perfect height. But when you press the front suspension, as you would expect it to bounce back up, mine doesn't. Which means that there should have been some level of adjustment in that coil before I put it onto the car. And this brings me on to what I think Cada and other brands, but particularly Cada, could improve on. At critical stages in the instruction book, they should put a big red page that says, stop, before you go any further, test this, this, and this. Because this should do this, and this should do that, whatever it might be. It would have been great to have that at the gearbox. There wasn't enough instruction around the suspension for me. There was no mention of adjustments in the instruction book. And the gas lift, although it's a shame, I could have tested that considerably earlier than the end to make sure it worked. So I would love it if brands would just, at those critical moments where something really needs to work, and if you go any further and it doesn't work, you're in trouble, they stop you and get you to just check. That would have been handy, and maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. So not a Cada thing, definitely a builder thing, but something for Cada to work on to make this set a little bit more accessible. So overall, would I recommend you go out and buy this set? Would I recommend this is the #1 thing on your Christmas list? In a nutshell, yes. If you're a petrol head and you like 1/8 scale cars, this is probably the biggest no-brainer of the century. And at 260 odd quid, when you think of price per piece versus the equivalent Lego set, it's probably half, less than half. It's not comparable to anything I've ever built. Some people have already started making comparisons to the Lego P1. You can't. The Lego P1's got 3,900 pieces. This is in a league of its own. This sets a new benchmark for this type of build. And I wonder if Lego will follow suit. I don't think they will. I think they've got a different audience. But if you are looking for your next big car build and you want to know which one to go for, this is a no-brainer. You will enjoy it. It will look amazing. Now that I've told you what to look out for, you won't make the same mistakes that I did. And I guarantee, no matter what your display looks like, this will be the best one on it. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. I have no idea what's coming next from Cada. It will more likely be in 2026 now. This is going to be a very, very tough act to follow. For now, I'm off to build something else that maybe I'll put on YouTube as well. See you soon.